areas of the brain like the prefrontal cortex and the hippocampus and the amygdala, things like that that are so important in areas like executive functioning, decision making, impulse control. These are incredibly important areas of the brain that need to be given the chance to develop appropriately. I really don't recommend anything with a psychoactive component to anyone while your brain is still developing.
Welcome to the Miracle Plant Podcast, the show that inspires, promotes, and gives you a daily dose of inspiration from the people who have used cannabis to change their lives in extraordinary ways. Here's your host, Justin Benton.
Welcome back to the Miracle Plant Podcast, where we discuss this miracle plant with so many names and how it's helping people in so many extraordinary ways. Well, today we have a very special guest. Such an honor to have. We have Dr. Rebecca Siegel on, who has published an incredible book that I have recently read and thought was such a great, so many great insights and answers so many questions that a lot of people have. And we get them all the time here at the podcast and at 101 Hemp. And the name of the book is The Brain On Cannabis, What You Should Know About Recreation and Medical Marijuana. So she's joining us today, which we're so excited. Welcome to the podcast. How are you doing, Dr. Siegel?
I'm great. Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. Well, we are very excited, and by reading your book, and it's a fantastic book, it aligns with so many of the things that we talk about here on the podcast and through our guests. So we can't wait to get in there and ask you some questions, because there is so much confusion about cannabis, even just the name and what do we call it. So we're so excited to ask some questions for you. Of course, we're joined with my co-host Dan Humiston and Janet Ben Gaillard. Welcome, Dan and Janet. How are you two doing this fine morning?
I'm doing great.
Fantastic.
So am I. I've not completely recovered from last week's game, Justin, but I'm on my way.
My heart goes out to you, man. Once again, it was the best NFL weekend we've ever seen of football games, and unfortunately, someone can't win them all, and you guys played good enough to win, but you guys got a great future ahead of you. But I digress. Back to the topic at hand. Go Bills. Dr. Siegel, would you tell us a little bit about how you got introduced or how this plant, cannabis, started to come into your life, and what was your introduction, and what caught your attention to start to study and truly understand this plant?
Absolutely. Happy to explain. So it was a patient of mine who came to me in early 2018 saying that she no longer needed medication to help her sleep for her terrible insomnia that had plagued her for years. And I was very curious, and she said, well, and she actually pulled out a chocolate bar, showed me a photo of a chocolate bar that she had gotten in Denver. It was actually an edible, a cannabis chocolate bar. And she said, this has changed my life. I no longer need the medication to help. And I said, wow, I couldn't believe it. And, then her request to me was, could I help her with this? Which, I knew, so I'm a practitioner in New York State. And I knew that, and I've been practicing for about 15 years, maybe even 18 years. And I am an adult psychiatrist, a child psychiatrist. I have 3 daughters of my own. I have a lot of experience with a lot of things, but cannabis wasn't one of them. And so when she said this to me, it piqued my interest tremendously. So I started looking into it. I knew that cannabis was medically legal in New York State. That I did know, but I didn't know how to get involved with it or how to, be able to certify people for it, nor did I really know anything about it myself. And so that kind of piqued my interest and started my journey. And, the way I am is that when I get something in my head, I want to learn more about it, and then I want to share it, educate, and make people aware.
Fantastic. And from that, I assume you probably, it sounds like you're a lot like me. I call myself a rabbit holer. And so when I want to investigate something, I go all the way down the rabbit hole. And when we were looking for a solution for our son, who had been diagnosed with severe regressive autism at the age of 3, we were looking for hope for anything really to see how we could clear the fog for his brain. And when we heard about the incredible success that was being had with children, seizures and epilepsy, that's what really caught my interest. And that's when I was like, well, if it can help with seizures and it can help with epilepsy, then maybe by the grace of God, it can help with neurological ailment like autism. And so that's what got us attracted to it. But when were attracted to the plant, through this particular story or this instance, how far down the rabbit hole did you go, and what did that include?
Well, I definitely wanted to learn more immediately, but what I did learn was how to become a certified prescriber of medical marijuana in New York State. That was the first step so that I could actually do this. But then, and what they require is very little in my mind, to allow physicians to do this, and that includes having a valid license, having a valid DEA, so that you can prescribe controlled substances, but also doing a 2-hour course to learn about cannabis and the endocannabinoid system and sort of their idea to educate people. But and I did that, and I knew I didn't know enough. So I actually started going to conferences. And one of the first ones I went to was a conference at UCLA for physicians learning about medical cannabis and its uses. And that was my sort of first, foray into it. And it was incredibly interesting and exciting and really, really, actually, the idea that I had to write a book came from there.
That is awesome. That's incredible. And as you started to learn more, and then had the the license or the certification to prescribe, cannabis. What were some of the early stories? Because it's the Miracle Plant podcast, and we call it that because we literally started the podcast, and I reached out to Dan on his platform PodConX, which what he hosts, cannabis and hemp related podcast, and I said, Dan, I keep hearing all these incredible stories because we have physical stores in California and Colorado, and through online and things like that, we kept hearing these incredible stories, and so I was like, we just got to start a podcast, just have people on, tell their stories, just give them the mic and say, what happened, what's your story, and tune in, grab the popcorn and maybe a box of Kleenex. So when you first started prescribing it and having people come to you, are there some stories that basically people would want to hear and be like, because I know with what you're prescribing, we usually talk on the raw side of hemp, so that's CBDA, CBGA, all of the like raw things you would find in juicing the plant. But I know when you're prescribing in New York State, it's more, would you say, on the marijuana, high THC side? And I assume you probably also educate people on both sides of the most common cannabinoids, which are THC and CBD. But do you have some stories you'd like to share with the audience?
Absolutely. So one of the second patient that came to me, I remember vividly. It was actually a mom that I knew from one of my kids' soccer teams, and she had been diagnosed with breast cancer and was about to go through chemo, and she actually approached me and said, I think that I heard that this was something you were involved with, and I've heard that cannabis can actually ease the symptoms of nausea, when you go through chemo. And she was terrified about that and terrified about a breast cancer diagnosis. And so, I said, absolutely, let's talk about this. I wanted to educate you how this can be helpful. But, that definitely was a very memorable story for me. And she actually did get certified, and it helped her through her treatment. which was a wonderful thing for me to to understand and hear about. And it just kept evolving that way. And people would come to me for various different things. And yes, in New York State, it was for what I was doing. It was mostly about THC and CBD, but I have to say, I am I am very cautious at baseline. I am very aware. I have a balanced approach to all of this. Cannabis is not a one size fits all. It's unique to everybody and how it affects them. So I am very, very balanced and cautious, but do understand that there are some really incredible uses for cannabis. I'd say in moderation.
May I hop
Absolutely.
in here too? So my understanding that basically what you do is prescribe marijuana. And so you don't have involved in your practice anything to do with like CBD or CBDA, because they're legal and don't need a prescription. Have you followed more research?
Actually, that's not quite the case. So
Okay.
I actually had another patient come to me who actually through her nephew, who was her guardian, she'd had a stroke and had a severe seizure disorder secondary to the stroke, and they found that using CBD through hemp products was very helpful in decreasing the seizure frequency, which, as we know, this is the same thing that your son may have found, or that Epidiolex, the actual FDA approved medication, right, using solely CBD, helps reduce seizures in children with severe seizure disorder, Dravet syndrome, and also Lennox-Gastaut syndrome. So they were very interested in hearing about this, and I actually certified this woman for solely CBD products, in the medically legal New York State dispensary.
Okay.
Awesome.
And
So I actually have used just CBD.
CBDA. And then as Justin talked about our approach or whatever with working with my grandson, who had real severe autism with like global IQ delays you could not measure, and no speech and no behavior issues. And then through the course of many different approaches, we actually developed our raw whole plant CBD product for him. And then very quickly we saw improvements. And by kindergarten now, he's been in regular school without any handicapping conditions or interventions, top of his class, uh, totally removing of the symptoms so far of autism. And so we had moved on then from the CBD, even the heated CBDA, into the raw unheated CBDA. And just wondered if you followed any research on that, or have become aware of that approach to dealing with issues.
Yeah, no, I definitely am aware of it, but it's much harder, as I am, if I do certify people to use medical cannabis, I am limited to the products that the dispensaries have.
Ah, okay. Because as you know, too, in a dispensary, even the CBD products there by law have to have higher levels of THC um, than products that you would get not at a dispensary. So, okay, that's very interesting. I didn't realize you were limited to that.
Well, and that's one of the things that we certainly, I mean, we're out here in California, and I know New York has become very new to cannabis. You guys, as far as recreational access goes. So, do you know about how long that New York State has had access to the medical side of prescription, roughly?
Yeah, so I think it was from 2014 that it was medically legalized. And as we know, it is now adult use, and they're starting to set up, they're getting ready to do this. And I see this as a tremendous opportunity for myself as a physician and other physicians, to help people increase awareness. And medical cannabis is definitely how I recommend, adults go about this. I cannot control that, but to have to have a physician who understands cannabis and how the modes of delivery and the ratios of THC to CBD, and even the understanding of all the different endocannabinoids and phytocannabinoids in the plant, is a huge benefit but people don't really realize that. So I can only, try to make people aware and educate them that using a physician, a knowledgeable one, may be a better way of doing things than doing this on your own, especially for those who have no prior experience with it, which is a lot of people.
Absolutely. Dan, did you have something to add?
Yeah, I was said maybe we would segue a little bit into the book and talk a little bit about some of the some of the things that people will learn when they read the book.
Sure. So, I mean, this book covers so many things. It covers a lot of a lot of my stories that patients came to me, and I mean, everything that people I'm a sponge, and I like to hear and learn from others. I say that, everyone I meet teaches me something, and so then I want to impart that to them, to others. So, you know, how people use it, what people use it for, why people are using it. The discussion about is it helpful, or is there a a dependence type of situation. Like I delve into that in the book. There's so many things about this. Cannabis has been out there and been around for forever, and now we're just getting around to trying to understand it. I'm all about, please, more research is needed for physicians like myself to get behind it. Most physicians, even physicians, don't really understand it. And I am one of the few that is really seeing this as, wow, this is really, for many, it can be a form of medicine. But unless the research is done, and larger scale research, physicians won't get behind it.
Yeah, and it's exciting that we have so much research coming, and obviously it's hard to do research on a controlled one substance, but we're making progress, and we've come leaps and bounds from where we were even 10 years ago. So more research is coming, and I love refreshing and checking out pubmed.gov to see what's coming down the pipeline. And we will touch back on some recent research that came out that we'd love to discuss with you. But one of the things that I think a lot of people have questions about, that you wrote about in the book, that I would love to get your take on, what your opinion is on your research and your practice of marijuana and use with children. And you can go teenager or below. What has been your research? What has been your experience as far as recommending marijuana for people under the age of 18?
Well, in my mind, and what we know is that the brain is developing until you are in your mid 20s. And so we want, and I work at a wonderful clinic called Amen Clinic, and Daniel Amen, who started this 30 years ago, is all about brain health. And we do a specific kind of brain imaging where we look in the brain and see what's, gives people an idea of what's going on in their brains in order to help them deal with all kinds of psychological issues, and other than that, brain trauma and things like that. But the research that we have done over 30 years shows that the brain is developing until you are in your mid 20s. And so in that way, I am true to Amen Clinic and the research that's been done, that we really don't want to be recommending anything like when we say marijuana, meaning THC, for the developing brain, because it may have a big impact on how the brain develops. It's been shown that it can absolutely impact areas of the brain like the prefrontal cortex and the hippocampus and the amygdala, things like that, that are so important in areas like executive functioning, decision making, impulse control. These are incredibly important areas of the brain that need to be given the chance to develop appropriately. So I really don't recommend anything with a psychoactive component to anyone under the while your brain is still developing.
May I jump in there and say thank you, thank you, thank you? No, I work with a lot of people, and I work with a lot with autism and people around, actually, kind of around the world at this point. And there is a certain group of doctors working in this same field who are recommending high dose THC for children, young children with autism. And I just find that not helpful. And to me, it's just not good medical practice to do that. And again, too, I often talk with people that we talk within our offices that come in for help that, if, and I use kind of the terms like men's brains develop, take a little bit longer to develop than women. But again, to about 25 to 27, you're taking a risk to have that be building up in your brain, and explain too that our brain is still developing its more complex, prefrontal areas then. I'm just very happy to hear you point that out, because I've been saying it, but obviously I did not carry the weight of a doctor. And a doctor works with Dr. Amen, who I'm very familiar with and very much enjoy everything that he does and believe in his research. So that's one of my hugest conflicts I have working with people, is the doctors in our field that are still recommending it for children. And especially for autism, which again, too, is another neurological dysfunction. So I really don't want something else adding to that. So thank you very much for that.
Absolutely. And Daniel Amen was instrumental in getting this book published and out there for me. So I owe him a huge, debt of gratitude, and so appreciative of all the work he has done in
Well,
this
I
field.
just knew you two would get along. I know that has been something that my mom has definitely been advocating for, and we were happy to see that you were on the same page about not recommending high THC cannabis products to children.
Well, I don't recommend
So,
high THC products to anybody.
well, and once you turn 21 in New York or California and 30 some odd other states, you can do whatever you want in those states, at least for recreational or medical. But yes, and maybe more reasons too. I know you mentioned some, but just as your research and working with Dr. Amen, what are some of the other specific things in the brain that may have an adverse effect to THC, that THC may adversely affect the brain functions or parts of the brain development?
Well, the two that come to mind are, first of all, is cannabis. The whole plant, a gateway. Is it a gateway drug when used, in younger developing minds? And the other thing is cannabis use in younger people a potentially, leading to psychosis or schizophrenia if there is a predisposition to it. So those are two huge things that are, you know, very scary for me to think about. And I always say more research needs to be done in order to really understand this, but also can you make this statement? Is this really true? And that much larger scale research needs to be done. There's a huge argument on both sides to say yes, cannabis is a gateway drug, or no, cannabis is not. And the other point is that is it causation or correlation, right? That's also a very big thing. Is cannabis going to lead to psychosis, or does someone have a predisposition to be, to have that type of mental disorder? And then cannabis might just kick it off. We don't really know, but I am so cautious and very aware that this might be, that I all I can say is that I recommend more research be done, large scale, well controlled, designed studies, so that we will really know.
Absolutely.
Now, that's
And
excellent. That is a common question. Just in my experience, and I admit I grew up in the 70s, and I saw so many of my college classmates drop out of college after heavy use of marijuana. And just recently, I had worked with a man who literally was exhibiting psychotic symptoms when he came to visit us. And actually, he took the CBDA, and it calmed him enough that he was able to go to a judge and not be placed in jail. I assume he went back to his ways after he got through the court issue, though. And so I've done some research on that. So again, too, it's all preliminary. We don't have exact research on the psychosis aspect. And then the gateway drug, too, I haven't seen really exact science on that. I personally, in my own experience, have not seen it as a gateway drug. The people I work with that smoke a lot of marijuana that I know too, they tend to be their drug of choice, but I'm sure at some points they might try other things. So, but you're right, we need more research on all aspects of this. So very excited to have your book and have so many things covered. And I like the way you would say, like, is it this or is it this or whatever, and kind of covered both sides of each of the issues. So that's a very important part of your book.
Well, and the other thing that I and others should understand, and more research needs to be done, is that can CBD actually mitigate that, right? Or CBD has these wonderful anti-inflammatory properties that can be used and harnessed for such wonderful, good, things and opportunities. But we have to understand it better.
I totally agree. And again, too, it's been 7 years now. We've been working with the whole plant CBDA with a wide variety. And then the research I do on that too. And the CBDA certainly does. And we see it a lot with people who are smoking too much marijuana that use it for that. And one of the most dramatic uses we saw, besides helping with, like I say, with autism and with like Parkinson's and MS and those types of things, anxiety and pain are the main reasons people take it, is the CBDA really was helpful. When the opioid crisis kind of hit a point 2 years ago in February, where suddenly the pharmacies had turned it off in California anyway, I had many people coming in who'd been on opioids for 20 years, often like veterans and people with injuries, and they were able to get relief from both the addiction and the pain with the CBDA. And again, to one of my limits, not working in a university, is being able to do research, but that's an area I would love to see. And the research is very clearly showing more and more that the CBDA, the unheated version, which is actually the most prolific in the hemp plant, has properties beyond the CBD. It goes beyond the endocannabinoid system and actually interacts with most of the cells of the body. And our favorite doctor, Dr. Raphael Meshulam, we call him the godfather in the cannabis field. He came here in 2019 to say CBDA was the most powerful and effective of all cannabinoids. And one area in particular he pointed out was with nausea. Research on nausea and CBDA showed it was up to 1,000 times more effective than CBD or THC. And so he and Dr. Raphael Meshulam, Dr. Ethan Russo, have also been kind of our leading doctors that we've followed in developing what we're doing. So I'm just really excited to have some of the research move forward into the CBDA. And we're starting to see that more and more coming out.
Yes, and
Absolutely.
I definitely look forward to, reading and learning more about it. And yes, they're instrumental in, leading the research for sure. And Raphael Meshulam is a god in my mind.
Well, we were lucky enough in 2019 that he came out to CanMed, and it's cannabis medical short
I
for.
was there.
And
I was
oh,
there.
good. So
Yep,
you saw him,
I
yes. And
was
so we were
there.
right there in the front row, and we literally like reserved the seats that morning. I remember when they opened up the doors because we had a booth there, and we as soon as because I could see where he was going to speak the keynote across the hall there, and so like I could see it, and I'm like I grabbed a couple of the staff. I go, dude, grab these 4 right here, grab these 5, and lay down. Put stuff on them, and because we're just gonna get these seats. And so when he came out, I mean, you remember that roarous applause that he got? Everyone stood up and gave him that ovation as he walked out on stage. Do you remember that?
I surely do.
I remember it, and it was Mick Jagger coming out on the Rolling Stones, and I was getting emotional because he had meant so much to what research has meant so much to our family, and had meant so much to so many families and so millions of people that have used this plant to help with medical ailments. So yeah, I'm glad you were there. That's great. That was such a great time, and yeah, and that was the time that he did was, as you recall, he was talking about all the acid precursors, CBDA specifically, and CBGA, and a few of the others. But yeah, I'm glad you were there. We were in the same room watching Dr. Meshulam, so that's wonderful.
Yes, that was when my book was in its sort of like beginning stages of forming, and it came out in this past September 2021. So yeah, it's been a huge journey for me and a huge journey following all of this. And the amazing to me is cannabis has been around for thousands of years, and it's finally being investigated further and researched, and it's still uh, illegal federally, and that has to, in my mind, that's the first thing that probably has to change in order for it to really be accepted as a real medicine.
It's great that so many states have adopted some type of access, whether it's medicinal or adult
It's
use, and
huge,
yeah, and
huge.
it's helping people.
Well, what's also
And
interesting is that just recently, New York, where I practice, I mean, just this is hot off the press. Just days ago, New York has recently increased its accessibility to people, meaning physicians are able to certify for anything that they see fit why people might need, medically legal cannabis. Before, insomnia wasn't a medical condition that I could certify people for. And anxiety wasn't a condition I could certify people for. That's incredible to me, because for the most part, that's why many people will use cannabis.
absolutely, and I think something that you're going to be really excited about, and I can tell we're going to talk a whole bunch more, is the when you keep the plant in the raw form, the CBDA, the CBGA, the THCA. It doesn't have the psychedelic or the psychotropic effects that people associate with the Cheech and Chong movies. And then you can really, when you start to really go down that rabbit hole and understand the true potential of the plant for for its medicinal properties. I mean, essentially, Dr. William Courtney's been on here a few times, and he says that the cannabis plant should be a dietary essential. And if you ate the plant every day, you wouldn't have to use it as medicine. And so I look forward to getting that over to you, some more research and some products for you to try and see for yourself the difference with the raw plant. And there has been some incredible research that's come out recently, which has been all over the news. I don't know if you had a chance to read much about it, but there was a couple articles or researchers. The first one was the one out of Oregon State, and talking about CBDA and CBGA helping protect those ACE2 receptors from the COVID virus attaching. And I didn't know, the thing that excited us the most, because everybody in the world sent me that article and those researchers. And I was like, yeah, I've known about that for years. And different studies and countries have shown that since this whole thing started. But the fact that they were isolating the molecules THCA, CBDA, and CBGA, those were the three they were studying. That was the needle mover for us, because it's like people are asking about what is CBDA and what is CBGA, and at that research that you were there, that conference with Dr. Raphael Mechoulam, that was the first watermark for CBDA. When Dr. Raphael Mechoulam came out and told the world CBDA is up to 1,000 times more powerful, effective than CBD, that was when it was like, okay, everyone started asking about CBDA. That was a needle mover. But this research out of Oregon State, I believe, is having a similar effect of at least having a conversation about these acid precursors. So did you get a chance to read that study or hear much about it from Oregon State?
Yes, absolutely. And I'm definitely incredibly excited about the possibility for this. But like I said, it's all about, showing the medical community that this is research based, and you know what I mean? And it has to be larger scale trials, large scale studies that will move the needle for physicians.
Yeah,
Absolutely
it's
agreed.
very true. It was just exciting too. And the way they came up with which ones was just checking which natural products or small molecules, they called them, that had an affinity for the spike protein as something, as a possibility to do some treatment. And so it's interesting that it was the hemp CBDA and the hemp CBGA and then the THCA that had that affinity. And then when they tested it in the lab against live viruses, they were still effective at blocking, somewhat like an antibody blocking the attachment to lead to infection. And so definitely, yes, it's hopefully people are funding more studies now to move that forward. But again, too,
But
we're very
I think
excited.
there are tremendous opportunities for cannabis in every way.
Right. So anyways, we're excited about that. And then there's a lot of the news confusion. A lot of people like late night talk shows were saying, oh, this means we just need to smoke more pot for COVID, and which would be a totally wrong response.
Well,
And then there's a lot of talking back saying, no, it has to be the raw form of the hemp plant. But
Correct. And people don't hear that. They hear what they want to hear. But in my experience with people coming to me and being curious about it, but also really wanting options, other options than medication, is they don't want to be in quotes high. They don't want necessarily the psychoactive effects. They want the medicinal effects. And so
right.
that's what I am, trying to work with and trying to understand better. And I want more research done
Right.
so that I can understand it better.
There's quite a bit of research done on the CBDA. And like you had mentioned, it has those very strong anti-inflammatory and antioxidant. And also it's very good at homeostasis, or balancing most of our systems. I know in terms of COVID too, it was very good at balancing the immune system or the anti-inflammatory level, so it could not allow really overreacting or the cytokine storm or whatever. So there's a lot of research out there. And again, too, there has always been more interest in THC than CBD, or especially the raw CBDA. So the research has been more slowly to be completed. But again, too, the direction I'm reading, my understanding of all the unique benefits of keeping it raw and going into the whole body and things, I'm hoping that we continue to see more research. And just in your practice, I know it's medical marijuana. Do you ever see yourself moving toward, like I say, the raw CBDA products or just CBD products, and not from the dispensary, because there's going to be a pretty high level of THC in them for them to be in the dispensary. Anyway, I just wonder if you saw yourself moving toward that or researching more in that field of the raw CBDAs.
Well, I mean, as I say, as a physician and as a scientist, I like to call it cannabis, because it has such a multitude of properties and compounds and options and opportunities and things that it might do and might be helpful for. I'm not a bench scientist to say this is what like that I'm going to use. I'm going to use the research. I'm going to use what comes out and I can trust to say this is what I will do. And if it comes out in large scale that they're saying raw CBDA and CBDA products are what will help the most, then that is what I will get behind. Absolutely.
And at the end of the day, too, I mean, it is about education, and that's why we have the podcast, and that's why we're so happy to have you on. And the book, that you wrote about it, The Brain on Cannabis, What You Should Know About Recreational and Medical Marijuana. You could find it Amazon or Audible. I'm a listener. And, some of the other things that you talk about in the book is you talk about best ways to consume the cannabis plant. Would you care to share that with our audience? What is your normal recommendation when it comes to the best ways to consume the cannabis products?
Well, absolutely. Thank you. I think that when each person is an individual, right? And so I want to understand the individual, and I want to understand, meaning what medications are they on? What medical conditions do they have? We're also in a pandemic, where it's a respiratory illness, and my thought is we really don't want to be putting anything into our bodies that's going to impact our lungs. So for the most part, my recommendation is that you really don't smoke or vape any cannabis products, that you want to be safer about it. And certainly with recreational use, many people are very much into smoking and vaping. That is not my bent. I am much more towards the tinctures, or we could say edibles. Edibles are a very newer concept in New York State where I practice. It's been capsule and things like that. It's been capsules and tablets, not edibles, right? So that is more of my thought behind it. We don't want to be impacting the lungs in any way, especially during COVID.
So what you're saying is smoking marijuana won't keep you from getting COVID. Because I know that was the punchline that people out there were using. And in fact, smoking cannabis or smoking marijuana isn't, necessarily the best thing maybe to do for a virus that attacks the lungs, right?
Absolutely. And I really don't want to be, look, I mean, I want first do no harm. That is the first tenet of medicine. So I have an approach of moderation. I have an approach of caution. I am not recommending that anyone smoke or vape. I am definitely taking into account every individual person that comes to me to understand what's going on for them and how I can be helpful to them.
And just so people are, because vape products, I think it was in 2019, they started to show some side effects. They started to show some studies that it was being linked to as dangerous as secondhand smoke, and then there were some more things that came out. Can you explain to our audience what are some of the dangers of vaping? Because some people don't know.
Well, yes, it was called the vaping crisis, and unfortunately the pandemic was just around the corner, so that really it took a backseat. But there were a many people who were ending up in ERs and very, very ill because of something in the vaping product. And so, as far as I'm aware, it was never quite understood exactly why, but the thought was that it was probably a component, a chemical component of what was either in the smoking or the vaping products. And so that is another reason why I do not necessarily recommend that anybody smoke or vape. The other thing is that I also do not recommend that anyone get it off the street. I definitely recommend that people obtain it legally, because you don't know, it is a plant, you don't know what you're getting. You also don't know, if you're getting it off the street, who's providing it to you, what it may be contaminated with all kinds of things. I'm very, very concerned about that. And certainly the desire that adolescents and kids in their 20s have about trying all these types of things. That's understood, and their frontal lobes may not be fully developed at that point, and to impulsively do something that may really harm your brain is a horrible thought to me. So to be as safe as possible.
That's
Thank
great.
you very much for those cautions. That's so important.
And would you say, I mean, because I know that people have, the top reason before the, beginning of March 2020, people came to us was for pain. It was clearly pain was the number one reason that people wanted to consume, our whole plant hemp products. Would you, and we saw it personally, but would you say in your practice or your research that CBD can be a good alternative to opioids and even the dependency upon opioids? I don't know how much experience you had with that or saw that in your practice or research you came across.
Yeah, so I've had a handful of patients come to me asking for my help to use cannabis products in a way to help them get off of use of opioids. And it's a complicated thing. It's a very complicated issue. But I have definitely found that in the way that I am able to recommend and certify people, that a higher concentration of CBD to THC is a much safer and much better way to go. Certainly for people to try to help them taper off of opioids. For sure, we don't want to um, cause other forms of dependence or addiction, and that's a slippery slope I get into, because addiction and dependence are very, very complicated topics and issues. But I definitely agree that cannabis can be an option to help. I've seen it be helpful for some getting off of opioids.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, we certainly saw the same thing as well, and that's
I've also seen it, like you said, chronic pain. I've also seen it be very helpful for. I've also seen it be very helpful for PTSD. I've treated a number of vets who have definitely been helped by cannabis products, and that is a huge topic, and one that has been in the news relatively recently, about the VA and the federal government and how to help vets.
Yeah, we agree. We see it here a lot. We're out here in Ventura, California. We're close to a naval base. And so there's a large contingent of military that we just come across and talk with, whether it be active or retired. And yeah, unfortunately, the VA stance on CBD is, archaic, to put it nicely. There's been memos that have been passed around in the Navy that CBD is illegal as far as they're concerned. And it's just been really, really unfortunate. And we've had employees for us that go to the VA and tell them that they're using CBD products, and the doctor says, I cannot put that in your folder. It's just been really unfortunate that so many veterans are suffering from PTSD because of what they went through. I mean, who are we kidding here? And they are being told that they can't have access to this product. So anything we can do to further that topic, to pressure whoever we need to pressure, whether it's Congress or whether it's the VAs or whatever branch of government, to give access, allow access to, at the very least, CBD products that you've seen and that we've seen help so much with PTSD. I know you had a couple stories in the book about PTSD. Did you want to share maybe one or two of those?
Well, yes, and I absolutely wanted to underscore the point that our policymakers need to understand that CBD is very different than THC, and that it can be so very helpful, and to not have the understanding and awareness that CBD is different than THC is mind-boggling to me. And so I have the desire to educate and increase awareness of the general, population of people, but also other physicians who just don't understand it either. And people of a certain generation really have very, very biased attitudes towards cannabis as a whole, and that is unfortunate. And these types of things have to change in order for cannabis to move forward in my arsenal of things that I want to use for people.
Absolutely, and that's why we're and I know this is your first time on Clubhouse, so welcome to Clubhouse and being on the Miracle Plant podcast, which we're recording live. These are two incredible platforms that we've had the opportunity to have these discussions, and there are so many great discussions that not only do we have on the podcast, like yourself and experts and doctors and researchers in science and people who have incredible stories, how this plant has helped them or their family, but also Clubhouse. Clubhouse has gotten, I've met so many cool people, so many brilliant minds, so many powerful stories. And so I'm really excited and fully encourage you to continue down the rabbit hole of Clubhouse. Just maybe put a timer on your settings for screen time at 3 hours or something, because I know when I first got on, it was a lot more than that. But yes, and it's been a great platform that we can have these conversations, and I'm definitely excited to have you on the Miracle Plant podcast. And are there any other things about the book you want to talk about, or any other things that are really kind of on top of mind for you to share with the audience?
Absolutely. So, as a parent of three daughters myself, and my daughters are 24, 21, and 16, I am first and foremost a parent, and I definitely need to get out the message that you really want to understand. If you think your kids are using or abusing cannabis products in any way, you need to understand what's going on with your children. You need to have good, honest conversations with them. You need to confront something head on. And there's all kinds of people that can help. And I think that is a huge message that I want to get out, that you really need to understand what's going on for your children in every way, right? And like I said from the start, I don't believe that anyone whose brain is still developing and maturing should be using cannabis products or any substance of abuse. And so to really understand what's going on, if you see changes in your kids' behavior or school performance or social attitudes, things like that, you need to be on top of things.
And I thought that was great in the book too. You talked about, it's an opportunity if you see those changes in their attitudes or their behaviors, or if you catch them, little Johnny with a bag in his sock drawers or doing his laundry, that it's an opportunity to come, get closer to your children and maybe discuss what things are going on in their lives. Maybe it's stress or pressure or whatever types of things that can lead them. Obviously, the peer pressure is a big one, but just stress in general. And I've heard it from all over the place that so many kids these days, over the past 2 years, with all this homeschooling and all of this fear that's been going on. Kids are really a lot more anxious than they've maybe ever been. Obviously, consuming large sugary sodas and caffeine from Starbucks might not be the best thing for anxiety, but there are certainly some real, consequences and things that are out there. And I love how your book covered that, to say this is an opportunity to get closer to your children and really understand what's going on. And you shared some great stories in the book about that. So I really appreciate that.
And
And
I
the
would say,
pandemic, the
I would
pandemic
say
has affected us in so many ways that are just coming out now. So we have an opportunity as parents to be involved with our kids in a much greater and in-depth way.
Absolutely. Were you going to say something, Janet?
I was just going to say thank you for that message. It's just a message I've been saying over and over and over to parents and especially to teenagers. And so if I have somebody who's, in their 30s, I say, you're an adult, you can make your own choices. Please be aware, though, of the positives and the negatives. But it's just hard to see that in writing and hear people say it out loud that, right, you do not put THC into developing brains and why. And so I was just very, very excited. And I can't thank you enough for sharing that message.
It is
Absolutely.
my ultimate message.
Well, and like I said, it's a really, really, really good book. And I definitely am a cannabis expert, and I've been around the block. And I was very impressed with the writing. And I loved, like how my mom said, you covered both sides of the arguments, because many of the arguments are still yet to be determined. And so you make cases for both sides of many, conversations that are a little charged in, like, is marijuana addictive, and what are the side effects of marijuana, things of that nature, that then you explore both sides of the debate. So I really, tip the cap to you there. Where can people find your book?
Well, they can absolutely find it on Amazon, and it's called The Brain on Cannabis, as you said earlier. And my website is drrebeccasiegel.com, and it will have a link to the book on Amazon as well.
Wonderful. And if someone wants to reach out to you and has more questions, or maybe even wants a recommendation or a consultation, what's the best way for them to reach out and contact you?
Well, I can definitely be reached through Amen Clinic. And the Amen Clinic website will direct people to all the clinics, but I am in the New York clinic, and I am on the website as Dr. Rebecca Siegel. And absolutely,
Wonderful.
we have lots of people reaching out to Amen Clinic these days as well.
And I know I'm excited to look at more of the brain imagery work that you're doing, and seeing that mapping out. That seems really exciting. And I couldn't let you go because, as we know, Dan Humiston, the Dan the Man, is a Buffalo Bills fan, and we're feeling for you, brother. We feel for you. You got a great quarterback and a great team. Now, Dr. Rebecca, are you a Mets fan or a Yankees fan? Because I
Well,
spend a lot of time in Jersey. Just got to get it. We got to
ac-
check that one.
actually, I am a Duke fan, and Duke is playing right now. Duke basketball. That's what I am.
There you
I went to
go.
Duke, and I am a rabid Duke fan, and so
Gotcha.
that is my true love,
There you go.
college basketball.
That's
And you're
awesome.
and you're going to have a new coach too, so that's kind of
That's right. That's right.
geez.
And when I was that's right. And when I was there, Coach K had, I think he was in his fourth year of coaching. It
Wow.
ages me, it dates me, but it was a wonderful thing that has been with me forever. The love of college basketball, and I gave the gift of that to my father,
So
college
you're
basketball.
so you were pre-Christian Leitner, Bobby Hurley, Grant Hill era. You were before that?
I was right before that.
Oh my
But
gosh! Well, I had a lot of friends that graduated probably were there when you were there, so that is interesting because I can't. Those guys, they're. I have to say, you guys have the right to be arrogant, and they certainly are when it comes to college basketball.
well, I mean, Coach Krzyzewski has created a dynasty, and it's going to be a very interesting thing how the torch gets passed. And but I am not. Will love Duke basketball forever, and I'm not giving up on it. And I think it's going to be an incredible program going forward.
Well, enjoy that victory lap with Coach K. I've always had the utmost respect for him. I was always a North Carolina Tar Heel fan, so I'm glad we waited till the end of the show to get that out there. But
well, I am hoping
Nice.
to be in the Carolina basketball stadium coming soon because the Duke Carolina game is
Oh,
coming
that's
up.
great.
I'm hoping to be
That's
there,
great. At
which would be an interesting thing for
yeah,
sure.
at home
Duke
or
at
away?
Carolina.
Oh, that'll be
Yeah,
fun.
it's at Carolina, so we'll see.
That'll be fun. It's a great rivalry, one of the best in all of sports. So again, thank you for joining us on the Miracle Plant Podcast. Thank you for all you've done. You've got a great perspective on cannabis, and you've helped so many people, and sharing your story and your book so people can, dig deeper and have some of those questions answered. And again, the name of the book is The Brain on Cannabis: What You Should Know About Recreational and Medical Marijuana by Dr. Rebecca Siegel, MD. Find it on Amazon or on Audible if you're a listener like I am, which it might be if you're listening to a podcast. And at the end of every Miracle Plant podcast, we send out a message of heal the world, because that's what this Miracle Plant did for our son. And we're just here to pay it forward for others that are out there that are looking for a solution. So on the count of 3, we say heal the world. So everyone on stage, unmute your mics. It's 1, 2, 3.
Heal
Heal the world! Thanks everyone for joining us on the Miracle Plant Podcast. Tune in next week. Well, we have some great stories and some great people to talk with about this miracle plant. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you real soon.